winter. Now, how many of you lose colonies of bees during the middle of the summer? I know, that didn't used to happen, I don't think, but it does now. And part of it is the same dynamic. It has to do with food. And part of it is the difference in beekeeping now as opposed to 25 or 30 years ago. 30 years ago, when I first started keeping bees, I don't remember keeping bees when you didn't have to do something about mice. So I don't have this golden age beekeeping mentality anywhere in my being, because I've always been at war with one or the other kind of mites, or both, and then small hive beetles. And once I got used to doing battle with those things, I started having little skirmishes with skunks and raccoons, mice, and I didn't used to hate near as much stuff as I do now. I used to be a relatively gentle person that just tried to live with nature, and now it seems like most of nature I'm wanting to kill it. But I don't remember keeping bees when you just set a hive out there and they made it. You know, they through the winter it was fine. Back then, what killed bees, American foul brood was around, but it would kind of go in waves or flushes. But swarming would have been the one thing that actually led to more colony loss than anything else before mites got here. Because when the numbers are the same, if you have 3 hives swarm, more than likely one of them's not going to get the queen back to it. So just like mating dues. So that was probably the main cause for colony loss before mites. Well, now we have a lot of other stuff that causes colony loss. And it's really easy to stand in front of people and just be kind of, speaking in pastel colors and all that, and say, well, if you keep your hive healthy and keep plenty of food on them, they'll survive. Well, yeah, they will. You know, if you're stranded, if you're floating in the middle of the ocean, if you keep the sharks kicked off of you, and then manage to float to an island that's an island paradise, well, you'll survive. Well, that's kind of like bees. They're constantly having to kick the sharks off of them. There's so many things that would kill a colony now that it's almost it's just a little bit too lightweight to say keep your hive healthy going into the winter, and you'll have a pretty good chance of it surviving the winter. Well, if you survive the winter, then you have to survive the spring. And if you survive the spring, then you have to survive the summer. And if you get through summer, you're probably going to get through fall. But getting through fall, you're right back to winter again. The basics of the whole equation are check your hives, make sure there's not something going on in there that would cause a decline in brood production. That's what's going to kill your hive, is a decline in brood production. Now that decline in brood production is, here's the problem. Decline in brood production, it's got all these rabbit trails running off of it. That is the decline in brood production because of a bacterial disease. Is the bacterial disease, it's got rabbit trails running off of it too. Is the bacterial disease caused by varroa mites vectoring this in, or is it a viral disease? Is a bacterial disease because of drift from sick bees that are coming into your hive, or from your bees robbing a hive that has died? So make sure your brood is healthy. The way that you know you've got healthy brood, look at the larva. If the larva is anything less than brilliant white, any other color other than brilliant white, if it's anything less than in a pearl in the bottom of the cell, there's something wrong with that larva. you have a brood disease. More than likely, the standard bacterial treatments, antibacterial treatments, things like paramycin, which is coming off the market, but more than likely, the standard antibacterial treatments will solve your brood disease problem. If you're seeing discolored larvae, or if you're seeing curled up larvae that's laid flat out in the cell, that's not normal. If you're looking at a cell and you've got a larva that looks like it's trying to crawl out of it, that is not normal. And you've got a brood disease, you need to stop it. So that is the number one thing. That and varroa mite pressure. Those things, if you take care of those two things, not just in the winter, you got to do this in the summer too. Fortunately, we have things now that we can use in the summer, in the middle of summer, that will let us treat with honey superzone. So, oxalic acid is one of them. And oxalic acid in hot weather does not have the effects of formic acid in hot weather. Especially if you use the vaporizer, you're only in there a couple of minutes per hive, and it don't have the detrimental effect that formic acid does. Is it a silver bullet? No. It's not perfect, but it's a tool. And you have this big toolbox of stuff that you can use. And if you have a nut that needs taken off of a bolt, you can use a socket, you can use an open end wrench, you can use a box end wrench. You might even use a crescent wrench. If you're me, you can use a chisel and a hammer. I like the chisel and the hammer because it does a lot of other stuff too. You can cut the bowl plumb off, with that if you need to. But it's one tool that we have that we can use with Honey Superzone. But keeping brood diseases to the minimum, keeping varroa mites at a manageable level, and there's a lot of IPM stuff you can do. Clarence is going to talk about that later. A lot of IPM stuff you can do. But the next part of this equation is feed. Bees don't just starve in the winter. If you take enough food off of them, if you harvest your honey first week of July, and you take every scrap of honey that they've made off of them, with the exception of what's around the brood nest, and we go into a dearth of nectar, a drought for July and August, half of September, those bees are likely to die because the queen is probably going to keep producing. There's going to be more bees to feed. They're going to be cannibalizing brood just for the protein, and they're not going to have that much carbohydrates. If you don't feed them, they're likely to die. Now, you can leave the honey on there and harvest it in the fall if you want to. If you haven't had a very good, like last year, it's really rainy, and bees didn't make a big early spring crop. And if you haven't had a big spring crop, and then you have a dearth in July and August, they're likely to die. Pay attention to your bees. And you may love your bees. I love my bees. Sometimes I love them to death. I've managed to kill them. I love them so much. But if you can love your bees, but you can't pet them. I mean, they're not going to crawl up in your lap like a cat and let you pet it. If you try that, you're going to be really disappointed. But treat your bees like livestock. If you've got a field full of cattle, you're not going to take all the hay, cut all the hay off your ground and sell it, and then hope that they can survive on the pasture the rest of the summer when it all gets scorched. That's what you're doing when you take all the honey off the bees and you don't make arrangements to feed them the rest of the summer. Don't be afraid to feed bees. And I talk to a lot of people at places that they have great intentions and they're very sincere about wanting to keep bees in the most natural, and the catchphrase is organic, our catchword is organic. The most natural and organic way that we can keep bees, and we don't want to do anything for the bees that is not natural and organic. And my first question is, why are you keeping bees? Well, we want to help the environment. We're saving the world. And they don't say that, but I mean, I read that into what they're saying because I'm immediately skeptical already. But I'm real comfortable being a cynic because you're never disappointed. If it turns out that I wasn't right, that we're all doomed, then I'm happy. You know, if it turns out that we are all doomed, then I was right. So I'm never disappointed. But I asked them, why do you want to keep bees? And keeping bees and not doing anything to them, just letting them live out there, sometimes that works pretty good if you don't take anything off of them. We are the biggest parasite that honeybees have ever known because we go and steal everything that they've worked for all summer long and then expect them to make it on paupers' wages. And if you take it away from them, you've got to give something back to them, or at least make arrangements to make sure that they've got enough to survive, not just in the winter, but in the summer too. And if you're afraid of getting sugar syrup in your honey super, take your honey super off. If it's a dearth, they're not working anything anyway. Recognize when your bees are working something that's not your syrup bucket, and when they're actually working something in nature, they're on a honey flow. When they're on a honey flow, put your honey supers back on. Quit feeding them. When they're not on a honey flow, if they're hungry, feed them. Don't be afraid to. Don't be afraid to pull your honey supers and treat them. If they get into some kind of a health issue, or health problem, or parasite problem in the middle of the summer, would you rather have, the question is, had you rather have a live hive going into the winter and not get any honey off of it, or empty equipment that you can split into the next spring, which is what you'll have. Now, losses aren't always bad. If you need equipment to split into and you don't want to buy it, don't treat it. You'll have plenty of equipment to split into the next year. So just let it ride. But Clarence is going to do an IPM thing later, and pay good attention to what he's got to say, because that goes a long way toward reducing losses. And when I make this broad statement, keep them healthy, make sure they got food. When I make this broad statement, he's going to provide all the fine points, which makes it really easy for me to do these presentations, having somebody like Clarence coming up behind me. So, any questions? Well, I don't know that. I know that Tylosin is labeled for treatment of American foul brood, but it's not labeled as a prophylactic treatment. In other words, you have to have American foul brood before you treat with Tylosin. And at present, it's not labeled for European foul brood. So I don't know that there's anything in the pipeline to take the place of terramycin. Terramycin will not be taken off the market because it's too broadly based in the different livestock that it treats. So it won't be taken completely off the market, but it will not be labeled for use on honeybees.
Why?
Mostly has to do with money. When a particular label designation runs out, they have to relabel it, and that costs money, and there's not enough market for terramycin to justify the expense. That's the biggest issue. Yes, ma'am.
Does the use of a headlamp with that intense light harm the brood, since it's used to all of the darkness of the hive? And then you go in.
Heat hurts brood. If you're
and that
grafted,
doesn't provide heat?
not the fluorescent lamps and things like that. If you're using a halogen bulb and shining down in the comb
Melting it.
to see your larva, your grafting success is going to be very poor. But the things that damage larvae is drying out, desiccation, and heat. Those two things will damage larvae as quick as anything that you can do to them. So if you're grafting, what I do is keep a paper towel, it's wet, and as I graft, I just pull it over, keep pulling it over the tops as I'm grafting. And that's frames that I'm going to use for grafting. I'll go to the bee yard and collect several frames of brood to graft from, and I keep those with bees on them in a nuke box sitting by my grafting table. The bees will take care of it. They'll keep the humidity right and the temperature right. But when you take a frame out to graft, don't shake the bees off of it. If it's what you're going to be grafting from, because when you do that, you're going to shake that larva down into the crease of the cell. Take a brush and brush the bees off of it. I mean, besides getting the bees off of it, you get lots of arthritis treatment. What's that? IPM is an acronym for Integrated Pest Management. That means using several different things that when they're combined will lessen the effect of the pest that you're fighting. Most of the time that's associated with varroa mite control. Any other questions? Yes?
What's the secret to keep burr comb, build up the queen cell, even if you're putting the frames,
Burr comb on your queen cells. Well, usually when that is so aggravating to have a frame, a cell bar with a bunch of queen cells, and you go in there and they build comb. You can see queen cells. If you hold it up to the light, there's cells in there, but it's just solid comb on it. That usually happens when you run into a big honey flow just about the time that you graft. And the only solution that I have for it is to take a scalpel and cut them out, because I am not going to be defeated by a bug. And I say that really tongue in cheek because I'm in constant retreat. You know? But I cut them out, and the queens will come out of there. When it comes time for those queens to come out, even if there's a bunch of comb around them, the bees will chew that off. In the mating nuke where you put the cell, the bees will chew that off. And they'll get the queen out of there when they're ready for it to come out. But it's aggravating, and there's not any secret to keeping them from doing it, other than if you close the hive completely off where they couldn't forage and couldn't go out, and all the food they were getting is just what you were feeding. That's really the only solution to that, and that's kind of a poor solution. When you shut the hive off, that changes the entire attitude of the hive. If they can't get out, they kind of get cabin fever or something like that. They don't do things normal anymore. They don't do what they're supposed to do, which they don't ever do. Any other questions? I think the next thing is a discussion and question and answer.
That's right.